everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney and I'm here today with part 3 of our B6674 sew along. Today we are going to be constructing our skirt and then attaching it to our bodice and then finishing off that lining and getting everything all basically finished except for the last bit of finishing pieces. So at the end of this you will have what appears to be a dress. The only thing that's missing is the hem and the buttons, and also the sash. I actually don't go through the sash on this one. It's just a tube that you sew together. But next week we'll be covering the button and buttonholes. We'll be leveling off the hem because the hem is dropping drastically. So we're gonna definitely have to do some leveling off. We'll do that next week, and we'll also be showing you, I'll be showing you how to do thread carrier loops on the sides for a belt and or the fabric sash that's included in the pattern. So yeah, that's what we will have to look forward to for next week, and next week will be our final week of this sew along. As always, if you have any questions, leave them down below. I'll answer those as swiftly as possible. And if you did enjoy this content and would like to help support the channel, I do have a Ko-fi account linked down below, which is just a chance, like a virtual tip jar, a chance for you to buy me a coffee is the idea behind it. But that is down below if you are interested or able to help support the channel in that way. All right, guys, I hope you have a wonderful end of your Sunday, and I will see you again next week for the end of this sew along. Have a good one. Bye. Okay, let's start working on our skirt. Get it attached to the bodice today, and we can finish up next week. Okay, so I have my two pocket pieces here. Let me get the pattern piece so you can see here what I'm talking about. And I've gone and we have two basically large rectangles, and I have serged all four sides on both pockets. Now on the piece here, it shows you the fold line. I have clipped into either side of this fold line so I can mark it on my pattern, and I can still see it through my serge lines. So they are on this side. So this is the top of the pocket. So what we're gonna do first is basically fold that right sides together down on itself. So right sides together, and I'm gonna sew at 5/8 of an inch on either side to sew that down on both pocket pieces. Okay, now if we're looking at our instructions, we are on, let's see, step 10. And this is, you know, we did skip around. We followed them for a little bit on the bodice, and then we skipped around since we did line. And we're not going to do this quite the same either, just because it seems extraordinarily fussy the way they have you doing these pockets. So now that we've sewn that right sides together, that top down, you can go through, and we're going to clip. And I'm trying to see, I'm following this fairly closely. So these are steps 10 through 13 that we're gonna kinda do here. So let me clip my corners on both, just to reduce the bulk there. Okay. Then you're just gonna take your finger and turn it right sides out. And so this is gonna do a couple of things. So the instructions want you to try and miter your corners here at the bottom. That just seems incredibly unnecessary to me. So I am now that I've turned this right sides out, I am going to take this over to the ironing board and iron that piece down, and it's naturally going to make your sides turn under the 5/8 of an inch. And then I'm gonna fold the bottom up 5/8 of an inch and press it. So I'm basically going to press the fold in the top of the pocket here, and then I'm going to press 5/8 of an inch in all the way around. And I'll show you how we can reduce bulk at the corners down here, just so you don't have anything weird popping out before we sew it on. Okay, so I'm going to go press those really quick, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so if you're having issues down here at the bottom of the pocket where you've pressed up, with things getting really bulky and with that corner like wanting to pop out, you can very easily go in with your scissors and so you see where it's folded up. You can cut that off at an angle, and it just reduces that bulk, so then it's not popping out on the right side. that's going to get obviously top stitched down to the front of the skirt here in just a second. But first, let me clip those two. First, we need to top stitch our fold up here at the top. And honestly, because I have a straight stitch machine, I stitch this with the wrong side up, and then I just follow my serge line. And I have busy fabric, but you can do it from the front side as well. So basically we're just, you know, doing the line of top stitching, which is super hard to see on this fabric. But you know, sewing that down. Okay, so once we have that sewn down, now we're going to attach it to the front of the skirt. So I'm going to grab my skirt front pieces and show you how I do that. All right, so here's one of my skirt fronts. This is the center front here, and there's my side seam. Now you can see I have pins poking up right here. So I mark the pattern placement, the top two corners of the pocket that's on the pattern piece, but on the wrong side. And then I just stick pins through so that I can then take this pocket, which I don't even know that I need the pockets. The pockets are optional, but I thought I'd go ahead and show you. They're gonna get completely lost in this busy fabric, but that's okay. All right, so we're just going to line this up at the edge. Sorry, it's kind of hard to tell. That's one end. There's the edge of the pin where the pin's coming through. So I'm just going to lay out my pocket like so, and that's how I line up my edges. I'm going to do a better job when I have two hands. But that's how I'm going to line up my pocket, and I'm going to pin it in the four corners to the skirt, and then I'm going to show you, I'll bring you around to the sewing machine and show you how I like to top stitch my pockets in place. It gets completely lost. Okay, so here we've got the top of our pocket, and I actually start this upside down. Okay, so I have this pocket pinned in place in all four corners. So here's that, you can kind of see the line of top stitching that's there for the pocket. That's where I'm going to start at that line, and I'm going to back stitch and sew to the edge. I'm making reinforcement triangles, if that makes sense. So now I'm going to sew at an angle up to the fold of the pocket. Then we're going to turn and sew 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. And now I am edge stitching this pocket in place. And remember, on the other side I did 4 stitches at the top. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we'll sew back down at an angle and back stitch right at that top stitch line again. Like that. So hopefully you can see that little reinforcement triangle there at the top of the pocket. That just helps. I mean, I don't know that I'm going to be putting things in these pockets, but it does. It looks nice, and it also helps to keep the pocket from falling off the front of the dress, which is always good. And that's how I do almost all of my top stitch pockets in. So there we go. So I'm going to do this to the other side, the other skirt front, and then I'll come back and we're going to do our side seams. All right, so now we are through step 14 is getting the pockets onto the skirt. So now on step 15, it has you sewing the two skirt backs together, but I was able to cut mine out on the fold, so I don't need to do that. So if you do need to do that now and serge or finish that seam. And then it's having you sew your side seams. So we're gonna do that now. I am using a rayon, as you all know, and rayon likes to grow. So I actually start at the hem of my rayon skirts and go up to the waistline on both sides. So that's what I'm going to do. And if we need to kind of ease in some growth there, or at least make it even, then we're going to do that. So I'm getting one, of the skirt fronts here. I'm going to start at the hem, and we're going to sew 5/8 of an inch all the way up to the top of the skirt. Okay, once you have your two side seams sewn, right sides together, I'm going to take these over to the serger and I'm going to serge them the same way. I'm going to start from the hem and serge up to the waist on both sides. Okay, so now the side seams are sewn and serged. So now I'm going to go to the sewing machine, the ironing board, and I'm going to press my seam allowances towards the back on both. And then I am going to, on the front piece, I'm just going to go ahead and press that. So I'm going to press it over the interfacing and then press it in again, just to give it a good memory crease on both sides of the front. So side seams to the back, press those, and then go ahead and press my placket just so we've got a nice, it'll make it much easier when we go to sew everything together later. So I'm gonna go do that. Okay, so let's talk about the instructions a little bit. So step 16 is where you're sewing your side seams together, and then step 17 they're having you stay stitch your waistband. If you wait till step 17 to stay stitch your waistband, it's gonna be too late. You might as well not even stay stitch at that point. So yes, make sure definitely you want to do that beforehand. Okay, so I have pressed my seam allowances towards the back, both of them, and then I just went ahead and pressed my placket in. Let me find it. Which is very easy. The first press, you're just pressing to the edge of the interfacing that you've done, and then you're just pressing right over that. So I have a nice memory crease, basically, which will make it super easy once everything is said and done to sew that into place, or even just to press it again once the bodice is attached. So now we're going to attach the bodice. So what we want to do is basically just match up our waist seams. Now unfold what you just pressed with the plackets, both on the bodice and the skirt, because you're going to have to, those are going to need to get sewn together. And as far as the lining is concerned, just push that out of the way. We just want to pretend like that doesn't even exist right now. So we're going to pin these together, and this is step 18 of the instructions. But we're just going to put these together and match up. So I've unfolded my plackets that I'd already pressed, which is fine. They'll just go back into place really easily. And I'm going to pop a pin in those creases so those match up really well. Again, my lining is pulled completely out of the way. You should have some notches that should line up. Oh my gosh, I am pinning the hem of the skirt to my bodice. Okay, that doesn't need to be unfolded. All right, so first things first, you want to make sure you are pinning the waistband of your skirt, not the hem. Okay, there we go. All right, we're going to unfold that. Again, lining out of the way. Now I have notches that match up. Look at that. Gonna pin those creases. Got some notches to match. My bodice probably, if anything grows a little bit, it will be your bodice, because your skirt was stay stitched, whereas the bottom of your well, I shouldn't say that. The bottom of your top of the bodice wasn't, but that's also more on grain. And I am pinning this. I don't use a lot of pins normally, but I am going to pin this just because, just to keep reference points. All right, so somewhere there's a center back seam. Or not a center back seam. I mark center back. I cut into center back both on my skirt and my bodice, because I did cut my skirt on center back fold. And then if you're noticing, yeah, I guess my skirt has grown a little bit. So see, even with stay stitching, your skirt will grow. So I can't even imagine if you had just now stay stitched it, what the waistband of your skirt would look like. It would not be pretty. So when I sew this seam, I'm going to sew with the skirt against the feed dogs, because that is the curved hem. So the most unstable edge, fabric, whatever, is what you're going to want to have against the feed dogs, because the feed dogs will help kind of push everything back into shape. And again, make sure your bodice lining is completely out of the way. Okay. Once you have everything kind of pinned the way you want it, I'm going to sew my waist seam. So I'm going to, again, put my skirt against the feed dogs. My bodice is up, and I'm just going to sew at 5/8 of an inch all the way around. So now you should have everything sewn together. Make sure you don't have any pinches. Okay, so now go, you don't need to finish the seam because it's going to be finished with the lining, which we will do in a bit. Yeah, that's gonna finish real nice. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is go to the ironing board, and I'm going to press this seam allowance up all the way around, and then I'll be right back. Okay, after I've pressed the waist seam up, I've just gone ahead and pressed that placket back over. Everything that we've pressed, everything should fall into place really nice on both sides. So now we are going to sew that placket into place. Now, I've got my, so my lining is just kind of free flowing here. We want to tuck that in to that placket edge, and it should fit in there just perfectly. But you'll notice down here at the seam we have a raw edge. So before we sew that in, we want to fold under the edge of the lining to where it just meets that stitching line of the waist seam. So this is just like if you were inserting a lining into any other dress. And I'm just gonna pin it to that first, that bust seam line where we've got that princess seam, because we can go back and pin the rest of it in just a bit. But you want to line up the cut edge. I hope you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to line up the cut edge of that the lining into that crease. And I'm just going to pin it into place because I'm going to slip stitch this by hand down. Then we'll fold that placket back over your lining. And let me think how I'm going to do this. Okay, and I'm going to pin this now because I'm going to sew this placket down that I have already pinned. Okay, so do you see what that looks like? Where it's tucked under, and then I've now folded the placket back over now that it's tucked under. Now the rest of the lining is still free here at the waist, that's okay. Once we've sewn our plackets down, we can go back and tuck that under and pin that in place. But I'm just gonna go down the whole placket and pop pins because I'm now going to sew. Technically you should sew from the right side because it's top stitching, but again I have a straight stitch machine, which means that my bobbin thread and my top thread look identical, so you can get away with top stitching from the bottom side. And this is all, let's see, going back to the instructions, this is all okay, I thought so. Okay, eventually we're not going to stitch the placket down all the way to the bottom. We're going to stop about 6 inches from the bottom because when we do the hem, we're going to flip this placket, just like we did at the top, back over on itself and then, you know, sew it right sides together. Do I want to finish it off that way? I mean, you don't have to. That's the way the pattern has you do it, but then you can't do a really pretty narrow hem. Okay, so we're deviating from the pattern. The pattern has you stopping 6 inches from the bottom of the placket for that reason, so that you can turn it over and have a little bit cleaner finish here at the edge. But I like to do a narrow hem, just like you would with a shirt, where I'm going to fold it up, and I think that that's going to be fine at the hem, so I'm going to do it that way. So now that I have my placket pinned down, you know, folded twice over itself, and I've got my lining all folded under and tucked under. So this will all get stitched by hand eventually. So I'm just going to sew both plackets down right close to the edge on both sides of the dress. Okay, so now we've sewn our placket down all the way down the end of the dress, so it looks nice and top stitched on the right hand side, although you can't see mine because it's busy fabric. But okay, so now what you're gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and do the other side, but now you're just gonna go around the waist seam and you're just going to tuck under the lining all the way around and then slip stitch that into place. Okay, so I'm going to go do the same thing I just did to the other side of the dress, and then I will meet you back here. Okay, so here is what we are left with. So the dress is finished, except that it does not have buttons or buttonholes, and the hem. And I can't, it's hard to tell on this mannequin, but I think it is dropping. I think my hem is definitely dropping, because my waist seems to be somewhat level, but again, we will check for certain. I'm gonna let it hang, actually for a week, until we decide to level it. But I just want to show you, so let me take this pin out. The inside has been hand slip stitched, the lining to the seam. And yeah, I mean, everything's done except for the button and buttonholes and the hem, and we will do that next week. And I'll show you how to level out the hem if it does in fact need to be leveled out. I think it might, so that'll be a good lesson. And then I will show you how I do, oops, sorry, not sure why that's going in and out. And then I'll show you how to do the buttons and buttonholes. We're almost finished. All right, see you next week.